subcommittee will be meeting right after our regular committee meeting today, so I want to keep us moving along so we can get to that subcommittee meeting and have plenty of time. First item of business would be requests for bill introductions. Do we have any requests? I have one. It is 25 RS 1181, and this is going to be the trailer bill to the constitutional amendment resolution that I introduced the other day. This is a trailer bill that will not be enacted this year because we need to wait and see what the result of a constitutional amendment, should that pass and get on the ballot. But I wanted to introduce this bill. It contains all of the parameters on how the transition would happen going from our current fair market value system to the averaging system. Would answer a lot of questions that I know county appraisers, PVD revenue, folks have a lot of questions about how that would be implemented, so that's what is contained in this bill. Is there any questions? Without objection, that request is approved. Are there any other requests? Seeing none, committee I announced yesterday we have minutes for January 28th that should have been received. Hopefully everyone's had time to review those. Are there any corrections or additions to the minutes? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to approve. Representative Wolf with a motion. Second, Representative Long. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carried. I think that takes care of all of our pre-meeting business or pre-hearing business. So at this point, we'll turn to the hearing on House Bill 2074, and I'll turn to the reviser first for an overview, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 2074 would include renters as eligible participants under the Homestead Property Tax Refund Act. Included under the bill, renters would qualify for a refund under the Homestead program starting in 2025, so the current tax year. To determine the amount of the refund, the rent constituting property taxes accrued would be defined to mean 15% of the gross rent actually paid in cash or its equivalent by a claimant and the claimant's household solely for the right of occupancy of a Kansas homestead. This amount would then be used to determine the amount of the refund pursuant to the table that currently exists for the determination of the homestead refund. And with that, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Siebers. Committee, any questions? Seeing none, thank you again. We'll turn to Department of Revenue for an overview on the fiscal note, please.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, Kathleen Smith with the Department of Revenue. We are estimating that House Bill 2074 would decrease state general fund revenues by approximately $14.8 million in fiscal year 26, 27, and 28. We are estimating that we'd probably add around 60,000 additional claimants if we add renters to the homestead program. With that, Mr. Chairman, I would stand for questions.
Thank you, Kathleen. This is a program that we had in place at one time. Am I correct?
You are correct. I think the last time it was on the books was in 2012.
Okay. Does the department have any information on the usage or the utilization from historical?
What would you like?
Yes. Well, I was just curious, are the numbers that you presented today kind of accurate or consistent with what was historically utilized?
In 2010, 11, and 12, we had around between probably 47 to 48,000 renters. And the total cost or the estimate for those renters was around 14 million, 14.5.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. Committee, any further questions for Department of Revenue? Representative Howerton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Does that account for inflation? Like if it was...
It wasn't based upon those numbers.
Okay.
Okay, that's just the historical data. Our current numbers are based upon census data and the average refund that we are issuing now for homestead.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Representative Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is, you have a lot of people that own one or two properties that rent things. How do you determine how much rent that renter is paying? Do they tell you? Does the landlord tell you?
They will have to fill out a specific form, which will ask for all of that information. There'll be like a certification of rent paid, at least that's what we did back in 2012. We will gather the landlord's information as well. We also gather information as to what the landlord is providing. So if they provide furniture, then there's a deduction for that as well.
Thank you.
Okay, any further questions, committee? See none. Thank you, Kathleen. We will now open up our proponent testimony and welcome first to committee Christina Ashe. I apologize. I missed your last name there.
It's all right.
Is it Goodry?
Guidry.
Goodry.
Like the baseball player.
All right. Welcome to committee.
Thanks. Thank you for your time this afternoon. My name is Christina Ashe Guidry. I'm here on behalf of United Community Services and the Kansas Housing Advocacy Network. UCS is a nonprofit that provides data analysis, leads collaborative planning, and mobilizes resources to support the health of Kansans. We are here as proponents of HB 2074. Kansas is in a period of economic growth. And to maintain that, we have to attract and retain our workers and employers. To do that, we have to look to home. Kansas has a housing shortage. We are missing approximately 100,000 units of affordable housing. At the same time, our affordable housing is disappearing. Between 2018 and 2023, and you have a graph of this in my testimony, the number of homes for sale for under $300,000 dropped from 63% of the market in 2018 to 43% of the market in 2023. So we lost about a third of our affordable homes in just that 5-year period across the entire state. During that same period, rents went up by an average of 31% just in 5 years. Our 2023 data shows that 43% of our renters are housing cost burdened. That is a national indicator or marker that means that those households are unlikely to be able to pay all their bills each month. They're likely choosing between food or rent or health care. In 2024, the legislature instituted property tax relief for homeowners, but not for renters. The renters are paying increased rent to accommodate increased property taxes and are more likely to be housing cost burdened than homeowners. So restoring them to the Homestead Property Tax Refund Act will support the housing stability of renters and support the renter to homeowner pipeline. With the ability to save, they're able to make their payments each month and look forward to the home ownership themselves. This will also make Kansas competitive with other Midwestern states who also offer this credit as we look to attract and retain residents and employees. HB 2074 strikes a good balance. It's a strategic tax cut for lower income renters and allows the state to continue to invest in the critical services that provide the foundation for our quality communities and keep our tax base intact. So we would urge you to support this bill, and I'm happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, committee. We'll go ahead and take questions at this time. If there are any questions, Representative Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here. So how are you defining affordable housing?
So if you look at the Kansas Wage Survey, we can look at the top 5 occupations. On the upper end, median income is $44,000. On the lower end, it's about $27,000. So those rents need to be less than $700 to $1,100 a month, including utilities. So that would be affordable.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further questions, committee? Representative Smith.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your presentation. And, you know, anybody that buys a house is going to struggle at first. I mean, that's just a fact. And if they happen to have children, they'll struggle more. And I just don't understand how they could ever get out of the rental business because it's just unaffordable. I look at these young people, and I don't know if they can ever own a house. What do you think?
Yeah, I was at a hearing immediately before this for their commerce on HB 2119, which was to eliminate the affordable housing tax credit. And I would say we have to keep the affordable housing tax credit if we want people my age and younger to be able to afford homes, or if we want folks who are retiring to be able to downsize. Without that, we don't have affordable housing being built in the state.
You know, my hometown that I'm working in, I think 51% of the houses are rentals. And that's kind of sad. I just, you know, it's too bad, you know, they can't buy something. And I don't know if there's a way out of it or not. So thank you.
Representative Clayton?
One of the things that you mentioned in your testimony was the home rental to home ownership pipeline. Could you talk a little bit more about that and what you mean by that?
Yeah, when you are renting, if you are renting at a rate that is below the housing cost burden, which is a maximum of 30% of your gross income, including utilities, then you're able to save. You can put money away and you will hopefully eventually be able to buy your own home. When you are paying rents that are at 30% or higher of your gross income, statistically, we know you will never be able to afford your own home. And so making sure that renters are able to access the same tax relief benefits for the taxes they're paying, just like homeowners are, helps them to make those savings and to make it on that journey.
Seeing no further questions, thank you for your testimony. Our next conferee is Nathan Kessler.
All right. My light is on, so I think I'm good. Chairman Smith and members of the committee, my name is Nathan Kessler, and on behalf of Kansas Action for Children, I would like to thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of House Bill 2074 today. KAC has long been supportive of legislation to reinstate renters into the homestead property tax refund program because of the relief it would provide to thousands of cost-burdened renters, many of them families with children. Since being removed from the program more than a decade ago, rents have risen substantially, along with the price of everything else. It should come as no surprise, therefore, that nearly 40% of renters spend nearly a third of their income on rent alone. This, coupled with a 395% rise in the number of unsheltered Kansans since 2019, makes clear the need to extend renters a lifeline. Since 2019, rents have risen by 20%, so that a unit that once cost $860 per month now requires the renter to shell out or to allocate $1,000, more than $1,000. For many renters, this is a difficult burden to bear. Renters experience poverty at a rate more than 3 times that of homeowners, despite a narrowing of that gap in recent years. Indeed, of all the Kansas families living below the federal poverty line, 52% of them are renters. For these families, a homestead refund is more than just a tax break. It is more food on the table, more gas in the car, and an improved economic outlook. More than improving the lives of thousands of people across the state, House Bill 2074 improves the prospects of the state itself. More money in the pockets of those that need it most will translate into increased economic activity that will boost state revenues and support jobs in Kansas. Taking this bottom-up approach to the economy will also make Kansas a more attractive place for young families and professionals seeking affordable housing and a lower cost of living. 23 states and D.C. already offer tax incentives to certain renters, including our neighbors to the east and the west. If Kansas is to have sustained economic growth, we need more people. By leaning into the value proposition offered by the state's affordability, Kansas can be a haven for workers displaced by higher costs in other states. With thousands of new jobs set to become available through major investments in the state, now is the time to invest in the people that will fill those jobs, or we risk cannibalizing the workforce of other companies. Given the considerable time and resources spent on lowering housing costs for homeowners, it seems entirely reasonable to finally include renters in the relief. We all feel the pinch of higher prices, and many renting families feel it most acutely. Continued discussion of cost of living relief must include Kansas renters, who make up more than 1/3 of the households in the state. I would therefore urge you to pass House Bill 2074 out of committee to move the conversation and the tax code forward. I will stand for any questions now.
Thank you, Nathan. Committee, are there any questions? Representative Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you say This was removed in 2014?
This was removed more than a decade ago, so about 2013.
Yeah, but a while back. Do you know why it was removed to begin with?
My understanding is that renters were removed from the program in an effort to pay for some of the tax cuts at the time.
Okay, so it didn't have anything to do with if you're a renter, you don't actually own property?
That is not how I understand the situation.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further questions, committee? Yes, Representative Wolf.
Thank you, Chairman. I may be sorry I asked this, but I'm going to anyways. So, depending on whether the first conferee or you, she was talking about being able to help them afford a house someday, sure. And you were talking about helping them be able to put more food on their table and pay for other expenses. So, what if, instead of making a check out to them, what if they had an account with the state and that money went into an account and then they had enough money in a few years to make a down payment on a house, then they'd actually have a house. Because if you're really stretched that thin, you're never going to have that down payment. And that down payment is usually 20% or even more. I don't know. It's just, I'm just throwing that out there.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great idea, and I don't think the two are mutually exclusive. I think you can have both.
Thank you.
We actually do have a first-time home buyers account set up with the state. They can do almost that exact thing. So, Representative, okay. Any further questions, committee? Representative Clayton? No?
Thank you. Just wanted to offer a point of clarification. This program was first put into place in, actually, can I ask a question of the revisor? I apologize. So, could you clarify when the program was first put into place and then when it was removed, and if there was any reasoning listed for the removal on the record?
I can answer the second part. When it was removed, it was removed during the 2012 session. When it was first put into place,
none of the staff was alive when it was first put in place, so Representative Sawyer might be able to opine. I believe it was the late 70s. In terms of if there was reason on the record, it was combined with a lot of other provisions into a CCR. So if you look at the final bill, you're not likely to see anything on the record. However, I do believe that a bill containing less was heard in at least one of the two chambers earlier in the session. We can track down that information.
Representative Sawyer.
Yeah, I'll add a little bit. The renters were included when the original program was started back in '78. So it was, but when it was ended in the 2012 when they passed the tax bill, the big tax cut bill. They had a few pay-fors in there, and this was one of them. They had this is relevant to the bill we're going to hear next because that was another one of the pay-fors. We also got, at that time, they got completely rid of the food sales tax rebate program. In 2013, we went ahead and reinstated that one, but made it non-refundable. And then there were a number of other itemized deductions that we got rid of in 2012. And then in 2017, when we repealed that tax experiment, a lot of those other itemized deductions that we got rid of got put back on. But this was part of a package of pay-fors, which didn't come close to paying for it. But that was the kind of the pay-fors they came up with in 2012 when they passed the tax experiment. If that, some background.
We're just a wealth of knowledge in this committee, aren't we? Any final questions, committee? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Next, I'd like to welcome Rabbi, and I apologize, you've been before committee before. Is it Rabbi Moti Reber? Okay.
Pulled it out of a hat, Mr. Chairman.
Welcome to committee.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Rabbi Moti Reber. I'm the Executive Director of Kansas Interfaith Action. We're a statewide faith-based advocacy organization affiliated mostly with mainline and moderate Christians, Jews, and Muslims. And we're here in support of HB 2074. So just to sort of dovetail on the conversation that just ended, the homestead property tax refund was repealed as a pay-for as part of the Brownback tax experiment, even though much of that has been repaired, both in terms of the state budget generally, and then also the school program, the school funding. This piece has not been put back in. So we consider this to be a more than 10-year-old injustice. As previous conferees have mentioned, almost 1/3 of all housing units in Kansas are occupied by renters. Renters have a much higher level of poverty. 19% of renters are at or below the poverty line, whereas only 4% of homeowners are, which isn't surprising because homeownership is the basis of many people's nest eggs. It's sort of an indicator of being out of poverty. Not always, but 4%. Census data indicates that rents have gone up over $200 since 2020, which leads 43% of Kansas renters spend more than 1/3 of income on housing. And that makes them house poor, and 73% of extremely low-income renters, which is up to $28,250 for a family of 4, spend more than 50% of their income on housing. Now, one of the reasons why this is coming up this year is because of all the conversation about property tax relief and assessments and the rise in assessments and what we should do about exorbitant property taxes or rising property taxes. But renters, even if the legislature takes an action or if there's a constitutional amendment or what have you, that will not include renters. Now, one might like to think that landlords would include would include a little bit of a give back to renters who are paying property taxes that may go down, but we will find that that's often not the case. So presuming the homestead tax credit will allow renters to take part in property tax relief, that is a super high priority for this legislature this year. So Kansas Interfaith Action is very interested in helping to address injustices in our tax code and also to provide relief for low and moderate income people. We believe that this is a historic carryover from a period where lower income people were meant to pay for the tax cuts for higher income people. That we consider that a direct injustice, and we encourage the committee to vote this bill out of committee so we can begin to address that injustice. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Committee, are there any questions? Yes, Representative Alcala.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I remember when this program was around before it got killed, the Brownback administration. But what I haven't heard anybody say yet is that seniors that would get the homestead, there was a lot of them in my district. They were living off maybe their passed away husband's railroad retirement.
Sure.
They fell within that bracket to be able to receive it at the end of the year. And let me tell you, it goes back into the economy. And if you're struggling, that little $200 or $300, whatever it might be per individual, makes a big difference. And so I would ask that, we not exclude seniors. And I bet they're the majority of the people that are grabbing it.
Thank you, Representative.
See no further questions. Oh, Representative Awerkamp.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question of the revisers on the homestead? The homestead program, the refund program, when it talks about some of the details, is you must have a household income of $42,600 or less. When they look at the household income, is that federally adjusted gross income, or is that just straight take-home pay, or how's that calculated?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It gets a little more complicated than that. The bill has its own definition of income. Under the bill, if you look on the first page under income, so it doesn't really follow exactly. It has some additional adds and some takeaways to determine income, more than just a straight line KAGI or federal adjusted gross income.
Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll go through it.
Representative Hoheisel and then Carlin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually don't have a question, but once
Rabbi.
the conferee, I didn't want to call you by name. The conferee is done. I do have something if I can be recognized right after he's done.
Yep. Representative Carlin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I remember some of my constituents calling me because their check hadn't come a few years ago, but I'm not sure. It seems like I felt like they had to apply for this, or is it when they file is it on the income tax filing? And would all these questions about income amount that the revisor mentioned, would that be a part of the application?
I think it's a form they have to fill out. I think they have to attest to how much rent they paid.
So all of these things that we list would be the way we determine their own rebate. So individually, we would go by their application?
Yes, I believe that's
Thank you.
accurate.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was on a committee yesterday that talked about HUD people, and they rent. Some of them don't pay anything, but some pay something. Would they be entitled to this? Because it just says renters.
I think it's just people who have rental properties. I don't know if people who are on Section 8 or something like that would be eligible for the program. I actually don't know the answer to that question, but I can try to find it out.
Okay.
Mr. Sawyer probably knows because he has a good historical memory.
As broad as it's written, I just wondered if that would go under there, or if that would the revisor know the answer to that?
You know, the homestead program there's two areas you have to qualify. One, you have to meet the income qualification. So you have to have the 42,600 or less. But then in addition to that, you have to meet one of three things. You either have to be a senior citizen, 55 or older, or you have to have a dependent child, or you have to be disabled or blind. So you have to meet all of those qualifications before you can qualify for the program. Right. And then there's basically two ways people file. One is with their income taxes. They can file it then, and they fill out all the information, what they're, in the old days, before we got rid of it, what your rent was, or now it's property taxes. But the other way is people can just file a separate form and just apply for this refund. If they don't file Kansas income tax, there's a form they could file. And I've filled out many of these over the years for people, so I'm pretty familiar with it.
I used to help my grandma do it, so I'm familiar with it.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, I also think that the closer you get to the income level, the less the rebate is.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, it is kind of a graduated scale. So, any further questions, committee?
Thank you,
If not,
Mr. Chairman.
thank you for your testimony. Representative Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I apologize for being late, and if this was addressed when I was late. I just got a text message from my county commissioner, or not county commissioner, county clerk Kelly Arnold, that he submitted written opposition testimony Tuesday, and he does not see it uploaded, and it is not listed. So I just wanted to see if we could look into that at some point. So,
Yeah, we'll check that out and make sure that gets distributed to the committee.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. That's all the proponents I had appearing before the committee. Is there anyone else wishing to appear as a proponent on House Bill 2074? Okay, Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee. Yes, I was up here yesterday. Military Officers Association of America advocates for the entire military community, including our veterans and survivors of veterans. We believe this bill would help some of those folks out, and because of that, we support the bill. We do have one suggestion on the bill. In the calculation of income portion, it refers to veterans' disability compensation is not included in the definition of income. The VA, in Title 38 of the Code of Federal Regulations, they have at least 3 different types of federal financial benefit. One of those is veterans' disability compensation. But when the veteran dies and there's still a surviving spouse, then there's a different type of compensation called dependency and indemnity compensation. And it's paid under a different section of the Title 38 Code of Federal Regulations. We'd ask that that be excluded from the income calculation. And then there's another category of veterans who are disabled, but they were disabled not because of their service, but the rest of something happened in the rest of their life and they're disabled. If they're disabled, they're elderly, they have low income, and they served more than 90 days during a war, so there's a 4-step test, they can qualify for what's called a veteran's pension. And that is not disability compensation. That's a separate section in the Code of Federal Regulations, Title 38. So I'd ask the committee if they revise this bill, amend this bill, that they exclude those other types of, and those are federally tax-free benefits, by the way, that they not include those in the income calculation that would work for this bill. I'm ready for any questions, sir.
Yes. Thank you for those suggestions. Committee, any questions? Yes, Representative Alcala.
So my question is that I understand where you're going with that. I think it creates a great separation of us and them. I think if we make those types of agreements or changes within the bill, I think we should do it for everybody that's on a disability and not be able to count some of their income that comes in. And I don't think that that's fair. So I think that we need to keep it a level playing field with everybody. This gives a separate group exclusion and inclusion into the program where some people that aren't military veterans or haven't served in the service will be excluded from it because they weren't participants in any type of military
Sir, I thank you for your observation. I don't have the entire income calculation memorized, but when I did read through it, I saw that Social Security benefits disability benefits were excluded from the calculation. So an individual that was disabled and had applied through the Social Security system, that those payments they got from Social Security would not be included. So to me, that's level with what veterans pensioners get.
Maybe I'm confused, but would the veteran, if he had Social Security that he was receiving, it wouldn't be included neither, correct?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear your question clearly. Could you repeat it, please? I'm sorry.
Veteran was receiving Social Security.
Yes.
That wouldn't be included neither.
Correct, it would not be included.
So you're asking for an extra benefit that regular people that weren't in the military would not be able to receive.
It's an earned benefit because they served during wartime, sir. So I'm not going to apologize for people that qualify for that.
Yeah,
I take your point, but respectfully, somebody that served during a war, they deserve special respect in my view.
I don't disagree with you. So let me tell you a quick story then so you don't think that I'm picking on you. So my dad was a World War II veteran, Burma, China, and India. He fought on the Burma Road. I remember my dad coming back, maybe having malaria till I was in high school. My uncle was shot down in Germany. They experimented with him, with his eyes, putting false eyes in him. He came back from there. I had an uncle that was in Midway and an uncle that was in Omaha Beach 2 days after the event. So I understand veterans' preferences, but I also understand fairness for people that weren't involved in the war. And I think if you do something like that, you need to have a level playing field for everyone. I don't think anybody should be special in this particular instance. And I have voted for all the veterans' benefits, but I think this one is asking a little too much, excluding people that are in the same boat with them, just not military experience. With all due respect, sir.
And sir, I respect your viewpoint. I think we'll have to agree to disagree on that. The federal government has passed laws to create the Veterans Pension Program, to create the dependency and indemnity compensation. We usually just call it DIC. Those programs are established under federal law, and they are federally tax-free. And that's why I argue that in this bill, it says veterans compensation, which is disability compensation, which is also federally tax-free. I think that those additional categories should be included. But sir, I respect that you disagree with that.
Yeah, and I'll just remind the committee, we can debate that potential amendment at the appropriate time, but this is more the opportunity just to hear the proponents and opponents. But we can,
I couldn't resist.
No, you're fine. Just want to make sure we keep on track here. But are there any further questions for Mr. Kelly? Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Kelly, this really isn't for you, it's just for anybody. But there's some good landlords out there that know that this person doesn't have much money and they're going to lower the rent for them. And then when they get a rebate, they're going to say, well, I'm going to raise their rent because I've been helping them and now they're making it. Does that make any sense, the question? There's some good landlords that'll help people. But when they see them getting a benefit, they say, I should get a little benefit too.
Well, sir, I think I agree with that. I'll tell you what happened to me when I was on active duty and I was renting from a naval officer who got transferred to Long Beach, California, and I was stationed at the Pentagon. And I rented his house and I was at one rank and I was fortunate enough to get promoted. And so my housing allowance and paycheck went up by about $200 a month. And when it came time to renew my lease, guess what happened to my rent? It went up by exactly $200 a month. So I can see that behavior happening in other circumstances. It happened to me.
Seeing no further questions, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we will go ahead and close the proponent section testimony. I'll draw the committee's attention to the written testimony we have. We also have written neutral testimony. And as Representative Hoheisel had mentioned, we might have some opposition testimony that needs to come through. Representative Kessler?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, I had kind of a weird question for the reviser, if that's okay.
Go ahead.
So in order for a renter to be qualified, the property has to be on the tax rolls. But kind of going back to that, if a homeowner applies for this and gets a homestead refund and they're delinquent on their taxes, that homestead refund goes to start towards those taxes. Is that correct? And if I am correct on that, does that have any effect on a renter applying for that?
That might be a question we have to research a little bit and get back to you if we
No problem. I just was
work the
kind
bill.
of spinning in my head on that. Thank you, sir.
Nope, good question. Is there anyone else wishing to appear as neutral or as an opponent on House Bill 2074? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the hearing and open the hearing on House Bill 2084. Pure coincidence that those numbers are so close, but we'll turn to the reviser for an overview on House Bill 2084.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 2084 would allow wagering losses to the extent allowed pursuant to the Federal Internal Revenue Code as a Kansas itemized deduction. The bill would allow such itemized deductions commencing for tax year 2025 and thereafter. And with that, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Siebers. Committee, are there any questions? Seeing none. Oh, Representative Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is this similar to the bill we heard last year?
It's identical except for, of course, the dates being moved up to the current tax year.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And now we'll turn to Department of Revenue for a review on the fiscal note.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, Kathleen Smith with the Department of Revenue. We are estimating that this House Bill 2084 would decrease state general fund revenues by $15.8 million in fiscal year 26 and each future fiscal year. Last year, it was a little bit lower, the fiscal note was, but we've had, based upon the data from the federal government, the IRS, gambling losses has increased dramatically over the last couple of years. So our estimate did go up.
Okay. Thank you. Representative Hoheisel? No? Okay. Representative Kessler.
You say gambling losses have increased dramatically, but this is kind of based off of gambling winnings. Can you kind of talk about that for a minute?
And I can't give you, I tried to look for the amount of gambling winnings. The IRS does not capture that specific information, so I was not able to grab that. They do grab the gambling losses on the Schedule A, the itemized deductions, and that's how I was able to, or how our team was able to calculate this.
Oh, okay.
But
so,
yes, it does.
So you captured what we are allowed to deduct federally is the number. Okay, thank you.
And yes, and it does specifically say that losses are allowed against or the winnings. Yep, yep.
Representative Sawyer.
Yeah, see if my reasoning seems right then. So if the gambling losses numbers went way up on the federal forms from Kansas, that also means the gambling winnings that are being reported went way up.
I would agree with you, yes. And if we could track that information down, I will do my best, but right now we're not able to locate it.
Okay, so we had an increase in revenue from those gambling winnings because we tax, and your losses are, you can only deduct losses up to the taxable winnings. So
correct.
Those numbers had to go up.
That's correct. Okay. Yes.
All right, thank you.
Thanks for that clarification. Committee, any further questions? Seeing none, thank you, Kathleen. We'll now open up our proponent section testimony and welcome first to committee, Jason Watkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Jason Watkins here on behalf of the Golden Circle. And just by way of, it's not my pen, Mr. Chairman. Just by way of some really quick information for the committee, the Golden Circle is a facility that's under construction right now up in Park City, Kansas, just north of Wichita. When the legislature authorized sports wagering here a few years ago, they also authorized 1,000 HHR machines to go into Sedgwick County. Historic horse racing machines are parimutuel wagering. And I think important distinction there, keep in mind with parimutuel wagering, the owner of the facility and the owner of our facility is Mr. Phil Ruffin. We don't make money based on people losing like you do in a typical casino setting. With parimutuel, the track or the HHR facility just takes what's called a take. Our money's not based on wins or losses. You're not playing against us. You're playing against other folks that are wagering on that pool. So just wanted to get that out of the way so that there weren't questions. The Golden Circle does support this legislation primarily as a matter of tax fairness. There's been a lot of discussion, and I won't recover it from the previous hearing. This gaming losses in Kansas were allowed to be deducted against your winnings. So just to be clear, if I won $10,000 and I lost $15,000, I could only deduct $10,000, not the entire 15. And that was the law of the land in Kansas up until 2012, when we did away with that deduction as a way to pay for a sizable income tax reduction plan. Years later, when we basically rescinded those tax cuts, there were a number of things that went back on the books. This particular deduction, much like the deduction that you just had a hearing on, did not get put back in. We think that was probably more a matter of oversight than an actual policy decision. I think over the years you've looked at several things and kind of a common theme that, yeah, it wasn't necessarily intentional. This needs to come back in. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. I think this is one of those bills, Mr. Chairman, that everybody can surely get on board with. I say that with a smile. But I do want to give you just a quick example. If I wagered $50 a day, whether that was parimutuel or sports wagering or in a casino, and I did that for 364 days, and I was perfect every other day. So one day I wagered 50 and I won 50. The next day I wagered 50 and I lost 50. And I did that for 364 days. At the end of those 364 days, I would have won $900 or $9,100. I would have lost $9,100 for a net of zero. In Kansas, the way our law is right now, I'd have to pay taxes on $9,100, even though I made nothing. Now, if I do that in the stock market currently, I pay nothing. I'm taxed on zero. If I do that in the crypto market, and some might argue that crypto is even more of a gamble than gambling, I would pay zero. So we do think it's a matter of tax fairness. And just a couple of quick points. Mr. Chairman. I thought it would be good for the committee to know what our surrounding states do in this area. Oklahoma allows you to deduct. Your losses are capped at $17,000 in Oklahoma. But everything up to $17,000, and again, this is against your winnings. If you lost $17,000, but you won nothing, you know, so, well, I stated that wrong. I think you have to win, just to be clear. You have to have winnings that this goes against because you're taxed on your winnings, right? That's why you're allowed to deduct on the losses. So Oklahoma allows it capped at $17,000 in losses. Missouri allows it, it's uncapped. Colorado allows it. There are some income limits for higher income folks. It ratchets down the amount or the percentage that you could deduct. And then Nebraska allows it uncapped. Iowa allows it uncapped. I know Iowa's not a neighboring state, but for some reason we always like to do a comparison with Kansas and Iowa, so I included that for you. Currently, there are 9 states, including Kansas, that do not allow this. It's Connecticut, Illinois, Indiana, Massachusetts, Michigan, North Carolina, Rhode Island, West Virginia, and Wisconsin. So we stand in strong support of this bill. Appreciate the information from the Department of Revenue on the fiscal note, but we would respectfully take the under on that. And I would stand for questions at the appropriate time.
I'm reading through your testimony. Do you have the information from the other states in your testimony? I didn't see that in there.
I wrote that testimony very quickly the other day when there weren't a lot of people signed up to do this and turned it into you and then did some more research today. So
and
I can supply that to the committee.
That would be very helpful if you would, please. Committee, any questions? Representative Carlin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jason, is this bill basically or almost exactly identical to the old way of doing it, or have you changed some of your the elements of the bill from what we did in the past?
I might, just because I don't want to answer a question incorrectly, let the reviser maybe speak to that.
Thank you. I didn't know if we picked up the old bill or the old rule.
That might be one we need to do some research on. If we work the bill, we'll try to get that information at that time. Representative Smith.
Mr. Watkins, does the casino keep good records for you? So you wouldn't have to keep every ticket as you went. Does the casino keep that record so they could give it to you at the end of the year?
I think it depends on the size of what you won. And keep in mind the parimutuel, which is what our facility is going to be a little different than a casino. In a casino, if you go and win a couple $100 on a slot machine jackpot, or you won $100 at the blackjack table, the casino's not keeping a record of that. If you have a larger win, they do keep record of that. And I believe, and the Department of Revenue can maybe answer this better than me, but there is an option to have taxes withheld out of larger winnings. So it's a little bit yes and no, Representative.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Howerton.
Yeah, thank you. So casinos provide a form, it's called a W-2G, and it's for gambling losses. And most casinos, I think gambling places do provide that, and it has the information. And if you have an account there, they will report your losses as well. So, and I have a question too, if I may.
I got a question on that. Is that a daily thing or
Annual.
An annual?
At the end of the year.
Okay, from the casino.
It's like a W-2.
Okay, very good. And your question?
I guess I could answer a part of that. As far as the old way, gambling losses were always taken off on a Schedule A. So if you itemized your deductions, you could take off your gambling losses. So it wasn't just a line item as a deduction on a 1040 so that would, on a Kansas return, it would be your itemized part of that.
So
and then go ahead.
So the old way, you would have to itemize to get the deduction?
Correct.
And it
would have to be greater than your standard deduction.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
So my question, and this is where I always get to hang up on that, because it used to be on the Schedule A, which is like, used to be like business use of home, business expenses, mortgage, medical, all that was on a Schedule A. But gambling, I always thought was very odd because it's entertainment. It's not considered like a financial investment. So if you could just help me understand that a little bit better, that would be great.
Maybe the next conferee can give you a good answer. I'm not sure how to answer that. I would imagine that professional gamblers would disagree that it's a form of entertainment. And probably gamblers that are losing probably don't think it's very entertaining either. So it's probably the best I can do for you.
Not much different than farming sometimes. Committee, any further questions? Representative Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So where did this end up last year? How come it didn't make it?
Yeah, I think my understanding of what happened last year was it passed this committee. And then it was kind of towards the end. And I just think it didn't get brought up based on the volume of bills that needed to be passed. I mean, that's a decision by the majority leader's office, and it just never made it above the line.
Okay, all right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
See no further, Representative Sawyer.
Just for clarification, I was looking at the bill. It does make it a Schedule A deduction. So it would make it just like it used to be. And back in 2012, you also could only deduct to the extent that you had winnings. So that part's the same as well.
So just, can you remind me, is Kansas limited on the Schedule A? I know the federal one off the back of my hand, but not the Kansas. Do we limit Schedule A deductions in Kansas?
What do you mean by that?
When we prepare the form, is there a limit to Schedule? Is it a percentage of the federal, or is it the full deductions? Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, we'll probably have to read that. We're asking a lot of questions. It would be great when we debate the bill. Let's focus on the testimony. No, it's really good questions. Make a note of those, and we'll definitely get those addressed before we take action on the bill, certainly. Any further questions for Mr. Watkins? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Our next conferee is Carol Kinderconnect, and she is joining us via WebEx. Thanks for tuning in. And Carol, are you still there? She was on earlier. I didn't know if she had lost her connection or not.
Yes.
There
Can you
you
hear
are.
me?
Yes, loud and clear. Welcome to committee again, Carol.
All right. Oh, thank you. First of all, my name is Carol Kinderconnect. I'm from Quinter, Kansas. I did testify last year on behalf of this bill as a proponent and advocate. We are in the far western part of the state, if you aren't aware where Quinter is, and it's a long ways to those Kansas casinos. But anyway, first of all, I would like to thank Chairman Smith and the distinguished members of the House Taxation Committee. The purpose of my testimony is I am an advocate and proponent for House Bill 2084. And it's addressing a pivotal legislation aimed at realigning our state's tax treatment of wagering losses with federal guidelines. Representative Kessler, I would like to thank you for drafting this bill 2084. The issue is relevant. The 2012 tax legislation, as everyone is aware of, had a significant impact to casino patrons, eliminating wager loss deductions. And their goal was to find and offset a shortfall revenues that could be given to the two distinguished entities of farmers and business at that time, and other different tax strategies that they had to where they would not be held with a state tax liability. But unfortunately, disallowing those casino losses ended up in the tax code to where the casino players basically carried a large burden of the shortfall of that lost revenue. The effects and results of the 2012 tax law inadvertently placed the burden on others it sought not to protect. It created unfair and equitable discrepancies in tax laws, affected individual casino players substantially, whereby they had to question the feasibility of going to casinos if they were going to be penalized and no longer have the deductions that they could use. It also affected the vibrancy of your Kansas-owned casino industry, a vital contributor to Kansas's economy and job market. And the reinstatement of the farmers and business tax liability was re-implemented, and the relief for the casino tax players was not reenacted for whatever reason it might have been. The key tax implications for House Bill of 2084, it would restore the fair tax treatment. It would also have economic support for the casino industry. It would enhance the equity in the tax code for Kansas players. It would stimulate economic growth, and it would also have commitment to equitable policy. Some of the major concerns that House Bill 2084 addresses, it approaches the need to be aligned with the federal standards for casino loss deductions. It supports the continued prosperity of an industry that is significantly contributing to Kansas economy. It also represents an equitable tax legislation that respects the interests of all stakeholders. And fourth, it ensures a balanced and supportive of economic environment. As an advocate and proponent of this bill, I would strongly encourage the reinstatement through this House Bill 2084. The present situation underscores the importance of fairness and support for both taxpayers and casinos. I'm speaking for many casino players in the state of Kansas. We meet a tremendous amount of people that we make friends with at the casinos, and many of them are not able to attend to this hearing due to the short notice that these hearings have, as well as jobs that do not let them attend. House Bill 2084 will correct a significant inconsistency in the Kansas tax code. It'll also bolster the casino industry's contribution to the Kansas economy. It will also restore equity and fairness in the tax treatment of wagering losses, and it also needs to be retroactive to January 1 of 2025. It would be nice if we could go back 2 or 3 more years to make it retroactive, but that is probably just a laugh. The testimony that I'm submitting highlights the broader implications of this issue, emphasizing the need for tax policy reform, and also supports the growth and sustainability of key economic sectors. The areas that the tax code change can affect are with casinos, who are significantly Kansas economy and help with a lot of job markets. The economic support for the casino industry, which the state owns a number of casinos in Kansas. Discontinuing the existing tax code misalignment policy, which would allow wager losses as does the federal. Promoting entertainment and economic synergy within the state of Kansas. Provide economic implications, call for tax relief, commitment to equitable policy fairness in tax treatment to casino patrons, stimulate the economic growth and environment that benefits all residents, including those that may not directly engage with the casino industry. It also benefits all classes of people, elderly, middle class, and all others, whereby eliminating the wager deductions in 2012 was a burden to casino patrons and the amount of disposable income and potentially affecting the overall financial situation. Sports betting has definitely become an upswing of popularity. Positive impact can develop by changing this tax law. As for the Taxation Committee, I would address these comments to you. As members of this committee, I would really urge you to consider the broader economic implications of House Bill 2084. This is more than a tax bill. It's an opportunity to correct an oversight in our Kansas tax code. House Bill 2084 can demonstrate on behalf of Kansas Tax Committee, House and Senate legislative departments a commitment to equitable policy for the well-being of its residents and businesses. Since 2012, casino players have more than contributed beyond the cause, and this tax bill is long overdue for reform. As Reagan previously stated, and Trump has committed, cutting taxes will result in more revenue in the end for the American citizens and government entities. Legislative overhaul through House Bill 2084 is a call for economic wisdom, aiming to reinforce the stability and prosperity of vital economic sectors. House Bill 284 is not only necessary, but long overdue. And I would like to thank you all for allowing me to provide this testimony via the web, because it was impossible for me to be there today. However, I felt it was very important to again be part of this hearing as I was last year, because of the number of people that we know at the casinos become friends, and also the same story over and over. When are we ever going to be able to deduct our losses on the state? So with that, if you have any questions, but it's kind of a rerun of how important it is to get this bill passed.
Thank you, Carol. Committee, are there any questions? I'm not seeing any. I guess previous conferee took all the hard questions. So Carol, thanks again for attending. Completely respect the fact that you have a long drive, and thank you for your testimony today.
You're welcome.
Okay, committee, that is all I have showing up as proponents. Is there anyone else that was wishing to appear before the committee to provide proponent testimony? Seeing none, I'll direct the committee's attention to the numerous written proponents. Is there anyone wishing to present neutral or opposing testimony? Seeing none, we will go ahead and close the hearing on House Bill 2084. We'll return to the item of business, request for introductions. Representative Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the courtesy of allowing me to introduce a bill at the end. I have RS 1084. This is on behalf of Sedgwick County. This is changing or tweaking the formula used on a countywide sales tax and how it's distributed to the cities.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? Seeing none, without objection, the request is approved. Okay. Is there any further business for the committee? Seeing none, I did want to make an announcement. The subcommittee will be meeting right after this. I apologize. I tried to get out a little bit earlier, but we've still got some time left here. I did want to make the announcement. I'd like to appoint Representative Hoheisel as the vice chair, just in case division. Yeah. If Representative Helgerson needs to leave for some reason, we've got chair and vice chair on that committee. But seeing nothing else, we are adjourned, committee. Thank you for your attention today.